I'm here with Steve Williams. Steve Williams is a chiropractor from the UK, and SOTO Australasia have got Steve coming out in November on the 18th, 19th and 20th of November to come and teach some of his advanced paediatric and SOT work. Thanks for your time today, Steve.
My pleasure, mate. Great to talk to you.
Thank you. Cheers. We always love having you out in Australia, and you've been out here a couple of times now. But for the people who've never seen you speak before or don't know you, what's your history? I know, you're, from my point of view, you're very big in SOT and also in paediatrics. What's your story with chiropractic and how you got into paediatrics in the first place?
Well, my story about chiropractic was playing rugby against a team of chiropractors, but that's a whole nother thing. How I got into paediatrics was just really having a child. I had no interest in paediatrics. In fact, I would have run away a mile from it, given the opportunity. But I had a child who had a horrendous birth. I often run through in my lectures this sort of classic way kids get injured in the birth process. And my son had most of those issues. And he was a really dysfunctional baby, vomiting, crying all the time, couldn't be put down, and then developed into a not learning disabled, but a very slow kid. And I sort of he can't go on like this. This is not, chiropractic has to have something to offer. So I learned everything I could of everybody I could. Took him to see my mentor at the time. I was just in my early days with SOT with John Howard, and then went on and learned off everybody I could. I ripped off stuff from anywhere in the world I could get any information from. And it's developed since there, and it's sort of been a thing. It was never a thing I chose. It was like it chose me.
Yep, and I think a lot of people have that kind of story in chiropractic too, because you've been teaching paediatric work within both SOT but also chiropractic in general for a number of years now, and you've written a great paediatric book as well about assessment and also treatment work that we can do with kids. So obviously this is a very passionate area for you, and you've spent a lot of time and a lot of effort trying to teach other chiropractors about this work as well, haven't you?
Yeah, for me the key thing is actually I'm absolutely passionate that kids need it. When I see the difference it made to my son from developing from a sort of learning disabled infant into a young adult who was approaching a rugby international, top of his school, head boy, and then uni degree, etc., etc. I hate to say he's a chartered accountant now. He nearly became a chiropractor, but that's another story. But now he's doing great stuff and loves what he does. So when I saw the difference that made, I thought, we've got to get this out to more children. And I can only treat a set amount, and really the major ways to teach it. So that's my primary goal, is to get as many chiropractors able to effectively treat kids as we possibly can. And it's going to become much more of a specialty within chiropractic, where people, if they're going to treat children, are going to have some experience or qualification in it rather than just out of school. And maybe that's a good thing. It could potentially avoid issues for us.
Yeah, and I think in Australia that idea of a specialty is definitely probably at the forefront for the profession worldwide, I think, at the moment. So for us in Australia, that's a really important topic as well. So that's great. So we've got you coming out for 3 days because you're coming out. We thought rather than just doing a 2-day workshop like we normally would, we're like, no, let's get as much info out of you as we possibly can. So on the Friday afternoon, we're going to run a workshop in the afternoon, I think from just starting around lunchtime. And that's going to be major focusing on your plagiocephaly work and skull strain pattern. So do you want to talk us through a little bit about that in some detail?
Yeah, this really becomes probably any area of my work is my absolute passion. It's the skull strain stuff, because we see so many asymmetrical skulls these days. The Back to Sleep campaign has just been wonderful for us and the work we can do on them. And there are so many skull issues in kids. And what I wanted to try and develop was, I wanted to know where the problem was in the skull. So what I tried to do is develop a three-dimensional understanding of what was happening within that skull to create the asymmetries. And so I put together a method of visual diagnosis, reinforced by other areas, but very primarily a visual diagnosis of what was happening in the skull, and then strain corrections to correct those. And we're modifying those all the time. They're changing as I'm getting input from other chiropractors as to what they find helpful, if they find certain bits work better. And so the skull strains are an ongoing thing. I'm modifying them all the time, and they're changing as we go through. And love to get the input from the Aussie chiropractors. I always learn a lot when I'm in Australia, and I have to say that I think the 3 times I've been there now, each time I've changed a little bit about what I do from some of the feedback that I see out there. So I hate to admit, what some of the more switched on chiropractors, and that's without blowing smoke.
Yeah, nice, cool. Because I suppose I learned a lot of my plagio work from you originally and some of our other mentors here in Australia. And the way you approach it from a correction point of view, and you do make it quite easy. I know your book and the posters that you've developed as well make both understanding plagio but also helping to correct it really straightforward as well. And you're going to be running through those techniques as well, aren't you, about how someone can correct it? Oh,
very much so. The key thing is the correction, and simplicity has got to be the way. But from my perspective, I wanted a stupid how do I, okay, that's what I got, how do I correct it? This is how. And so, yeah, it's a keep it simple, stupid is absolutely my way. And yeah, we're going to go through the corrections and the modifications we've made on those over the years as well.
Yeah, beautiful, cool. So then we move on to the Saturday and the Sunday program. I know there's going to be a few different things in there. I know you're going to do some work on the gastrointestinal tract, and I imagine that'll be some reflex work that'll go with that, and some more neurology type of work as well. I think you also mentioned you want to sort of maybe incorporate some of the new research in gut microbiome potentially in that as well.
Very much so. I mean, that's one of the things we've learned. And actually, you've got to say one of the best ways of normalizing a gut microbiome is a good chiropractic adjustment for kids.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are the other things about it. And the evidence base is now overwhelming that what your microbiome is as a child is going to be what your microbiome is as an adult, unless you're supplementing all the time. And, you know, your disease, the diseases you're likely to get, i.e. expressing the worst part of your genetic potential, will be driven by low levels of good gut microbes in the gut. And better levels of gut microbes mean you don't express that worst part of your genetic potential, where you express the better part. So, and that's what we're surely trying in chiropractic, is to maximize people's genetic potential. So that's where I think the gut microbiome stuff fits in so beautifully with the work we're doing on kids. And the symptoms most kids present with, or most babies present with, are screaming. And a significant portion of that screaming is coming from gut issues, be it reflux, be it colic, constipation, all those kind of common things we see. And it's how we then try and normalize that and get their gut working properly. But aiding that with, and I'm a strong believer in supplementation these days with the infants. If you can do it by the mum, that's great. But also I do it via supplementation straight for the child, because I think the evidence is becoming overwhelming that, you know, the better their gut microbiome is, the better the long-term defenses are, and the better their genetic expression is going to be in the long term.
Yep, absolutely. So that'd be really cool. And then, but that's only a part of what we do on Saturday and Sunday. The other great part, and this is a bit I'm looking forward to again, is some of your primitive reflex work. So we're going to be doing some primitive reflexes, but also I love the way that you package your age-specific neurological exams, where, you know, how you look after a neonate and a young bub compared to, say, a school-age child is very, very different. And obviously their problems can be very different, but in the end it can be just some primitive reflexes and integrated stuff. So tell us a bit more about how you go through that.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we're going to look at, I think, some the sort of standard examination we do on neonates and stuff, but then how those primitive reflexes are often not integrated as they should be, but retained, and then affect their health issues and their expression of their physiology later on. So we're going to look at that. And I think the age-specific stuff, I often get people saying, oh, it's very difficult to test primitive reflexes in a 3-year-old and stuff like that. Well, it's not really. You can do certain tests, and you can then look at what the child is able to do functionally, and then you can get some idea. It may be difficult to test an ATNR in a 3-year-old, but you know, he's not going to necessarily cooperate with the test for you, but they will show certain patterns of movement and certain issues which are going to take you down the road of thinking, okay, those reflexes are an issue. So there's a whole range of stuff. There's definitely a range of what we look at, from the neonates right the way up into the older children and teenagers. Indeed, some of the adults. What I love in teaching these classes is when we have highly educated individuals coming into these these classes we're running, and then they're doing the test on each other for retained primitive reflexes, and they're finding loads of retained primitive reflexes in them, and despite the fact they're able to work at a high level. And of course, if they hadn't had those, think how good they'd have been. So, we've all got our learning disabilities to some extent or another, and it's great fun running through those, and it's always a laugh to discover what we've got going on ourselves, and we realise why we found certain areas of our learning or certain areas of our psychomotor skills difficult.
Oh, absolutely. I remember when you were in Australia last time, we were in the Barossa, and pretty much you had a room full of chiropractors. Many of them have done the carry neurodiplomats as well. And, we were going through that list of all the reflexes that we had going on and showed up and rating them all. It was quite interesting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, we're all on an area of learning dysfunction. Just depends how far down the road you are.
And how much you understand about yourself too. So,
Yeah.
Cool. And so, we've got you coming out. It's the 18th, 19th and 20th of November. And I think you touched on this earlier. One of the things I love about any SOT get-together like this, and the AGM in Australia is great, is it's a great group of people that come together as well. So, we tend to have a lot of craniopaths there and a lot of guys who have done neurodiplomats. So it's not just about us learning from you, but it's also a great discussion. It's a great group that get together too.
As I was touched on earlier, that's what I love. In Australia, we particularly get it. We get a superb learning environment, and we get input from everybody. And I really welcome input. I'm not one of those guys who say, this is how you do it. You guys have got something to say it. And that's the beauty. And of course, in the bar, that's where lots of the learning takes place. It really is. What I'd just like to add about the neuro examination and stuff is, for me, the critical importance is of using simple chiropractic adjustments to treat those areas of neurological dysfunction and those areas of retained primitive reflexes. And that's also what we've started adding to it, is actually how do you make the changes in those reflexes? And we'll show some very simple ways we can do that, and adjustments we can do. But honestly, for me, I'm so looking forward to it as a learning experience for myself, which I learn at every seminar. But in Australia, it'll be great fun. As you say, the neurodiplomats and the craniopaths, it's usually good fun.
Yeah, definitely. Just a little bit. I always think we're a reasonably good group of people to hang around too from a fun point of view. So I always like that too.
Definitely. But that's true throughout the SOT world. And I've been through many different areas of chiropractic. The SOT world actually, it seems to encourage a fun group for some reason or another.
Yeah, that's great. Is there any other stuff that you're going to be presenting over the weekend? Have we covered most of the stuff that you're going to be
I think we've
through?
covered it. I'm actually just updating the presentations at the moment. So I've been sort of integrating a little bit of DNS, the pediatric DNS work, Voita's work on children into looking at babies, particularly babies with core stability issues, and how we can assess for those core stability issues with them. Which also means they're less likely to, if you can get that sorted early as an infant, they're less likely to have long-term core issues later on. So we're looking a little bit at that as well, particularly when we're looking at visceral disorders, because lots of the time you're getting visceral disorders on these kids, gastrointestinal problems, you've got a core issue with them as well. They're not activating their core properly. And we see that in probably about 30% of babies. And a lot of those are going to have gastrointestinal problems and reflux, and particularly the diagnosis these days, which is, reflux is just such a widespread diagnosis.
It is, isn't it? Cool. Well, thanks for your time today, Steve. I'm looking forward to catching up with you on the Gold Coast, November 18th, 19th and 20th. If anyone's watching this and they want more information, jump on our website, www.soto.net.au. You can contact Jackie in the office via there and via the SOTO office as well. And if you have any other questions, just ask Jackie. And otherwise, Steve, I'll see you in the Gold Coast then.
Mate, I look forward to it. Really.
All right, thanks for that. Cheers. All right, I'll see you then.